Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us here this morning, and I am particularly pleased to welcome once again New York State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli to City Hall to unveil his Central New York economic profile. As many of you know, I rely on the information that the Comptroller's Office provides to really look at how policies are working and to measure data. There are a number of you who have come to this very place and heard me talk about the importance of data in government and how I am a real believer in utilizing data to make good decisions and to assess which public policies are working and which ones are not. And a foundational part of that is the multitude of information and data that the Comptroller's Office provides regularly. This report that I think you all have and was posted this morning is a foundational report in our community's discussion of economic development. And in here, the Comptroller lays out the substantive information that can help inform policymakers such as myself, developers and business leaders and our community stakeholders about what present economic development conditions are, and so we can decide what choices to make them better for all of us in our community. And while I will let the Comptroller get into the details of his report, there is a theme that I would like to highlight. This report enumerates that there are certain members in our community that are making progress on a number of fronts, including steady population and growth in our downtown and our major economic development drivers of healthcare and education. But this report also highlights the pervasive and pernicious poverty which plagues so much of our community and the city in particular. Syracuse has an unemployment rate of 6.6%, which is higher than the state average, and that statistic, as all of you know, does not take into account labor force participation, which we believe would increase that significantly. And as all of you know, we see the effects of poverty in our community each day. 1 out of every 2 children born into the city of Syracuse will grow up in poverty, and unless we change the economic trajectory cycle, we'll never escape that poverty. My administration and other leaders in our community have done and will continue to do yeoman's work to address the poverty and the pernicious effects so that we can have shared prosperity across all economic development, across all communities in our city, and that they all have the benefit of economic development. And whether that is raising graduation rates, funding Say Yes to Education, increasing access to economic opportunity that people have in our city, we will continue to do that. I want to also talk about the report highlighting the Syracuse Land Bank and the progress that we have made in the Syracuse Land Bank. And it was also highlighted in the Attorney General's discussion of land bank, that we have the most active land bank in New York State. This is one of the important public policy initiatives that we have addressed and used data that has been provided by the Comptroller's Office to make sure that we have a safe housing stock and that we deal with vacant, underutilized assets in a productive way. So I look forward to continuing to work with our partners in government, the legislature, and of course Comptroller DiNapoli to develop creative data-driven solutions to address the generational poverty faced by people in the city of Syracuse, and in order to continue to have an upward positive trajectory for economic development for our community at large. So I want to thank Tom once again for choosing Syracuse to make this announcement about Central New York's economic development progress, which includes a number of counties and, of course, the city of Syracuse. And I want to thank him for making this data available so that we can continue to use it to have positive policy-driven initiatives to help everyone in our community, not just the select few. So thank you. Mr. DiNapoli?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Miner. It is really great to be back in Syracuse and great to be back at City Hall. I always appreciate that you host us when we have announcements to make, particularly as impacts on Central New York. I appreciate Mayor Miner's partnership in so many of our endeavors and efforts. She is a thought leader at the municipal level. I've learned a lot from her, and this city is very fortunate to have someone as experienced, knowledgeable, and independent, Stephanie Miner as mayor. So we're here to release our economic outlook for the Central New York region. As we all know, New York is a state with many regions, all unique, and that's why we are creating these economic profiles for all of New York's regions. Central New York is the second in this series. We did the Mid-Hudson Valley recently. Here's our Central New York report. We have hard copies available for you, and of course it is online. My office has closely paid attention to the economic health of the regions around the state, certainly in the aftermath of the Great Recession. We do this because the economic health of our regions impacts on the revenue that comes to the state, and so it's a very important part of our planning when we talk about state budget, and before you know it, we'll be into another state budget cycle. So while downstate New York, especially New York City, has recovered and added jobs since the depths of the Great Recession, we know that not all parts of the state have shared in those same economic gains. Central New York's economy is continuing to recover from the Great Recession. This region benefits from a wealth of locally educated young adults, a technically experienced workforce, and a comparatively low cost of living. However, many Central New York communities are still hampered by poverty, unemployment rates above the statewide average, and the loss of some large employers, and the mayor touched on some of those factors. Nearly 800,000 people call Central New York home, as based on 2015 data, with more than half of those residents concentrated here in Onondaga County. While the state's population grew by 2% from 2005 to 2010, the population in Central New York actually declined slightly by an estimated 0.6% during the same time period. With the exception of Syracuse, the region's population is less diverse than the rest of New York State. The white, non-Hispanic population exceeds 90% in every county except for Onondaga. The city of Syracuse, as I mentioned, and as we all know, is more diverse than any other city or town in this region, with relatively large African American, Hispanic, and foreign-born populations. Syracuse also has 2 resettlement agencies that assist refugees from many parts of the world. In 2014, Onondaga County took in 1,112 of the 4,050 refugees that were resettled in New York State. This afternoon, I'll be releasing another report from our office. I'll be in the city of Utica to discuss an immigration report that we're issuing that touches on some of these issues of immigration and resettlement of the refugees. What our report, the second report, will show is that immigrants are reshaping upstate cities like Syracuse, helping to revive our cities, helping to drive new population, and certainly bringing the benefit of diversity. Annual regional unemployment rates in Central New York have been improving in recent years, and that's good news, decreasing from 8.5% in 2012 to 5.5% in 2015, slightly above the statewide average of 5.2% for that year. Oswego County in this region had the highest unemployment rate of the counties in Central New York in 2015 at 7.2%. Onondaga County had the lowest rate at 5%. City of Syracuse had an unemployment rate of 6.6%. Not surprisingly, the largest employment sector in this region is government, the public sector, with over 61,000 employees, or 18% of total employment working in the public sector. This includes public school teachers and administrators, firefighters, police and correction officers, employees of SUNY Upstate Medical, the College of Environmental Science and Forestry, the 4-year SUNY colleges in Cortland and Oswego, and 2 community colleges. Employment in the manufacturing sector has fallen from 58,000 jobs to 30,000 jobs from 1990 to 2015. However, it's important to point out that certain segments of the manufacturing sector are actually doing much better and have either recently grown or are poised to do so in the next few years. By way of example, electrical equipment, appliance, and component manufacturing grew by more than 46% between 2009 and 2014. Food manufacturing operations for items such as milk, yogurt, cheese, fruit and vegetable products have been locating or expanding in this region, and employment is projected to grow in this sector. And given the region's geographic location, it's well positioned for truck transportation, warehousing facilities, and distribution centers. So even though we're always concerned about manufacturing and losing those opportunities, there are some bright spots here that suggest ways that we can build that out and grow those opportunities. Well, in order to take advantage of this region's geography, local officials have also insisted on making infrastructure improvements a major part of Central New York's overall revitalization plan. I think it was referred to recently as "You've made infrastructure sexy." Did I read that?
I didn't, when I said that, I didn't think it would be repeated often.
It made national news, so we didn't include that in our report, but...
Thank you.
But still...
It's a colloquial term.
You've made the point that economic development is so essentially tied to infrastructure, transportation, water systems, and so on. As we well know, this region's extensive infrastructure, which has certainly served the economy well for many decades, is aging. And infrastructure has become a great challenge. We've talked about that on many other occasions. Efforts are underway in places like Syracuse and Cortland to improve deteriorating water systems. There are ongoing improvements in and around Onondaga Lake to expand public access and recreation opportunities. Interstate 81 has seen certainly a lot of work in recent years, and as we well know, the state is studying options for the future of this roadway. I think we're down to 2 options now, right?
Yeah.
Another crucial asset for the region are the well-educated people graduating from the many higher educational institutions. Central New York's public and private colleges and universities are expected to help the professional, scientific, and technical services sector continue to expand. Local leaders and businesses are focused on harnessing this human capital, along with existing industry concentrations, to encourage innovation and entrepreneurship throughout the area. We got to do more to keep those young people that we educate right here in this region and take advantage of the opportunities that are emerging. So clearly, there are some positives for the region to report in this profile. But there are also some very serious challenges that local leaders like Mayor Miner have to deal with on a daily basis. Currently, the median household income in each of the 5 counties is below the state median at $58,687. In the region's cities, the median income is much lower. Here in Syracuse, it's $31,566. As a result, as the mayor indicated, the city's child poverty rate sits at 50%, significantly higher than the statewide average of 22%. There's always a flip side. Somewhat fortunately, data shows the lower income levels in the region are offset by the comparatively low cost of living compared to other regions of the state. But the fact remains, people throughout Central New York need meaningful jobs, good-paying jobs that will help improve the economic outlook in all of the region's communities. So I want to thank the mayor again for having us here, for setting the table for what this report is all about. And as the mayor indicated, we always collect a lot of data in the Comptroller's office. What we've been trying to do with this and so many of other of our reports is put this data in a useful format that really helps local elected leaders, community leaders, everyday citizens better understand the context of what's going on around them. When the mayor has to make tough choices about her budget, it's important for the citizens to know what's happening as far as the overall economy and where is the region headed. When business leaders are working with the mayor and the not-for-profit sector and talking about what are the strengths and what are the areas that need improvement, we hope that the data that's here, the points that we make in this report, will be a helpful frame of reference as we all try to move this region forward. As I said, we're doing these reports in every region of the state. We're very pleased that this is the second one in our series of reports, and really very appreciative to Mayor Miner that she's hosted us for this announcement this morning. So without further delay, I'll open up if you have any questions.
What do you think the key is to turning things around? Because as the mayor has stressed, poverty is an all-time high statewide around here, and also infrastructure is a big problem. What is the more important issue to deal with?
I think they're both important. Certainly, you can't separate infrastructure investment from economic growth. And certainly given the great location of this area, if you go back to the Erie Canal, right? That's really what created the prosperity that's here. So you have the basics in place, but it's an older infrastructure. We know that if a business might be thinking of locating here or expanding here, if in the middle of the winter, there are water main breaks happening regularly. That's not the most attractive physical environment. You've pointed that out to me on many occasions. Roads, certainly what happens with I-81, I think will be a key factor in terms of the future for the city and by extension the region, given the size of the city, certainly for the county and for the greater region as well. So, and there's been some progress there. The state has come up with some more money as far as water, particularly, and obviously the state's very involved in I-81. And I do think, as we've seen, that connection between higher education and business development and growth and developing the new economy is key. You have such an incredible asset here in terms of higher education institutions, both public and private. And it is troubling that we educate all these folks, many of whom come from this area or they come from other parts of the state, and I'm sure many of them would like to stay here after they get their education here or after they've grown up here. And yet there aren't enough opportunities here. So, some of what is targeted with the Upstate Revitalization Grant, 500 million came into the Regional Economic Development Council for this area, trying to spur some of the new technology and new kinds of industry. I think there's some promise there. We need to look carefully to make sure that that money is being spent wisely and appropriately. But I think continuing not only the support for education, but doing a better job of articulating between the product, right, the students that are coming out and the kind of degrees they have and knowledge that they have with the new opportunities that we want to see created, and understanding that infrastructure is key to having a community that is attractive to business relocating here or expanding here, or certainly staying here. I would not put one more important than the other. I think they're both very important.
And let me just add to what Tom very articulately said. I think that anyone who promises you a magic solution or one solution to this problem is being disingenuous. And part of what the Comptroller's report here does, and what the Comptroller's report on all sorts of information does, is it shows that we have a very diverse community, and it breaks it out. So one of the ideas that you could walk away from when you read this report is understanding that if you are highly skilled and highly educated, you have survived the Great Recession in Central New York. But then there's another flip side of it too, which is if you are not, or you are a person of color who's living in the city of Syracuse, you have tremendous obstacles that are getting in the way of prosperity. And so you have to be multifaceted in your solutions, because the problems are multifaceted as well. So it's infrastructure, it's education, it's skills, and it's making sure that we are creating or helping fill markets that can work with our particular assets, and at the same time that we're not walking away from any one group of people.
Say yes to education, obviously, if they can go with that. And Controller, you were mentioning that maybe adults don't have certain skill sets, and just wondering with economic development funds, should there also be more funds, a program for the state to incentivize people to go back to school at some of these fine universities?
I will say yes. There should always be more funds for education. In a global economic development environment that we have, people are highly skilled and highly educated are the ones who are doing well. And for us to lift everybody and have shared prosperity, people have to have pathways to prosperity, and those pathways are education.
Yeah, no, I would also say yes, and it's saying yes to education, right? Hence the name of the program. But all the economic analysis shows that there's an exponential difference in your ability to provide for yourself and your family if you have a college degree versus just having a high school diploma. And certainly for those that don't even have a high school diploma, you're really talking about a segment that's been left behind. So we do need to, at the earlier grades, throughout K through 12, or pre-K through 12 now as we talk, make sure that we're not having any students fall through the cracks. And then, on the higher education level, incentives for people to go to college, absolutely. It's part of the national debate also about, the cost of college education. We also put out a report, Mayor, earlier this year that talked about the student debt burden in New York in terms of breaking out those numbers for our own state. It's a big issue and a big concern. We need to enact the DREAM Act, which is an issue that will provide an opportunity for financial aid for the children of undocumented families, and that is an issue of statewide concern from my point of view. I also think that a better job of a thoughtful discussion, and this is sometimes hard for us to do, between the higher education community and the business community, so that while we're promoting education, promoting people going to college, that we make sure that we are preparing people for the jobs that in fact business is providing. And I think we also have to recognize that, while for me and for you, higher education made the difference. I was the first in my family to get a college degree, that for others there are other pathways to economic success. So working with our friends in labor, apprenticeship programs, which also provide opportunities that may not require a college degree. But again, doing a better job of understanding where we need to have the apprenticeships, with what kind of trades, in terms of where the opportunities are. So yes, support, incentivizing, but also greater communication. So we're not encouraging people to go to college and come out with a degree and then the job is in some other field. That's not easy to do, but I think it's something we need to pay a little more attention to.
And that's where data becomes so integral to this discussion, so that you can show, for example, in our building trades here in Onondaga County, we have an aging population. So we wouldn't know that unless we had the data to establish that. And by establishing that data, then we can say, we're going to have a gap in 5 to 10 years. Let's work on career and technical education at our primary level and work with our community colleges so that we can get them the skills that they need to be in a modern marketplace, but it may not be a liberal arts degree, that there are lots of different opportunities to prosperity. You want to make sure you use public resources in a smart way, and you do that by utilizing data to establish where there are openings and also to establish that there's a way that can make people successful if you have the right kind of public policy.
Governor Cuomo has been pushing upstate revitalization initiative. He's been pushing a lot of money trying to restart upstate's economy. Do you think that what he's been doing has been working at all? Has it improved any things in this region and elsewhere upstate?
Well, from my point of view, certainly it was appropriate, given how severely we were all impacted by the Great Recession, for the state to be more proactive in terms of promoting economic development. That being said, now that we're into 2016 and things are a little better, by and large, certainly on a statewide basis, it's true. Certainly downstate, that's true. It's a good moment in time to take a step back and take a look at those various programs. Some of them are new. Some of them have been around for a while, but have been utilized in more recent years for new projects and new initiatives. You also have other kinds of programs, the IDAs across the state, that play a role in economic development as well. And as you know, we've done a series of audits. We have more that will be underway looking at that very question. Not so much from the broad perspective, is it working, but really, looking in a more focused way on the particular programs and are they working as intended? And we found some opportunities for improvement. Certainly we had the audit on the Startup New York program with advertising, with the NYPA programs for economic development, and the Excelsior jobs programs. And we have some more, as I said, audits that will be looking at that question. When we put those audits out there, we're not suggesting that the state shouldn't be focused on economic development. What we're saying is when the state has programs and we're pumping a lot of money out, we shouldn't be afraid to ask the question, are we getting the return that's expected? Are the taxpayers getting the bang for the buck? And again, now that we're not in crisis mode as we might have been 5 or 6 years ago, I think those are fair questions to ask. So we're going to continue to look really program by program. I think the emphasis and the priority on understanding the need for economic development, especially for our upstate communities, is appropriate. But let's make sure we're spending the money wisely.
How often does the office put together these reports?
Say it again?
How often does your office put together these regional reports?
Well, actually, we just started. This is a new initiative. So as I said earlier this year, we did the Mid-Hudson Valley. Central New York is our second one. What's our third one in queue? Still to be determined.
We could do 3 a year.
We're going to do about 3 a year.
But that's on top of, I can tell you on my desk right now, I have the reports on IDAs, the reports on fiscal
stress.
The fiscal stress test for municipalities, reports on sales tax receipts. So there is a wealth of information and data that comes out of the comptroller's office. So again, with the idea that none of us are flying blind, we can say, well, here's this. I want to know, how is our sales tax doing? You can find out how that is, and then you can say, how are we doing relative to the other counties in Central New York, relative to the other states, and relative to the other counties in the entire state, so that you can benchmark yourself, and you'll have an ability to sort of see where you are and is that where you need to be.
I always say, we don't make law, we don't set the budgets of the Comptroller's office, but we do accumulate a lot of data. Some of it's through our audits, some of it's through our research operations. In this case, our local government division. We have a budget and policy division as well. In this era of challenge, we want to make sure that all New Yorkers are as informed as possible. This data does no good sitting on my desk. So we take the data, we try to put it in understandable format to help elected officials like Mayor Minor, but really, it's really meant to empower citizens as well to understand the context of what's going on in their own community. So I appreciate the Mayor's comments that these reports are also helpful, as are our other reports.
Mayor, one question. You're 6.5, 7 years in now?
We should ask the data wizard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had the last few years lots of press conferences about infrastructure, about poverty. Is there an actual plan that you have, and is it reaching out to the state for some help for that? Is there an actual plan that you
Well,
have to help?
Tom, there's lots of plans, every policy that we have. So let me talk about infrastructure. I think infrastructure, you've seen me be an advocate on a state level and a national level to bring more resources here. We've had modest success at the state level bringing more resources, but you also have seen us do a plan with our innovation team using data and technology to really jumpstart how we maintain and repair our infrastructure so that we can be more efficient. And you've seen that progress heralded across the country about how we are one of the most innovative cities in how we are using data to look at our infrastructure. And I've been asked to speak about what we have done here and what we are continuing to do across the country. So that's part of the plan. The issue of poverty, as I've said in the beginning, you've heard me say repeatedly, if there is a panacea to poverty, it's education. So we have worked incredibly hard during my tenure as mayor to support and make self-sufficient, say yes to education, and we have done that. And so you're seeing thousands of students who have gone to college, the vast majority of which are first time in their family to go to college. We're seeing those first wave of college graduates come back and take jobs, and also talking about how thankful they were and the difference it made in their life and their families' lives. So these are really challenging public policy issues, and you have to approach them both as an advocate, looking for partnerships and support from the state and federal government, but you also have to be able to say, when you go to them, this is what we have done on our own. We're not just sitting here like some damsel in distress waiting for somebody to rescue us, but you can't abandon us either. So in terms of water main infrastructure, we've developed algorithms to talk about where our most vulnerable water mains are, and we use that to determine where to repair and where to do the maintenance. But state, you still have an obligation to fund water infrastructure, and federal government, you do as well.
Is part of the problem then, once you've educated a lot of these people, it kind of opens their eyes. The thought is, I'll move somewhere else. Better is the
No, I don't.
than getting them to state once you've educated them.
No, I don't think that's a problem at all. And in fact, I think in my experience has been that the citizens of our community are much more educated and thoughtful about this than many of our elected leaders, because they understand that there's not a 30-second soundbite problem to deteriorating infrastructure. And what they're saying is it needs to be solved, it needs to be worked on, it's a core fundamental governmental responsibility, just like public education is. And so they expect us to work towards solving these problems and talk about it. But I have always said that my tenure as mayor, I'm not going to run away from problems. I'm not going to pretend like they don't exist. I'm going to run towards them and talk about them and talk about what our solutions are, as well as everybody's responsibilities. That, as the comptroller talked about when he said that I was an independent in many ways, that is a different philosophy than many elected officials have.
I think it's refreshing. I think people appreciate someone that doesn't sugarcoat a problem, because, as the mayor said, people get it. They know, and they'd rather be told straight what the issues are, what the challenges are, and have some sense that an elected leader gets it, is willing to confront it, willing to marshal local local forces and support from beyond, and this mayor knows how to do that.
And let me just add one last thing, Tom, as I think about your question about infrastructure in particular. When I first started talking about water main infrastructure, Flint, Michigan wasn't a problem. Now, Flint, Michigan became a problem.
Hoosick Falls, right here.
Hoosick Falls in New York State became a problem. I was down in Florida 2 weeks ago talking about water infrastructure down in Florida. Next week I'm going to be in New Jersey talking about water infrastructure in New Jersey. So the water infrastructure issue for our country is not something unique to Syracuse. It's shared across the country, but what is unique to Syracuse is that we talked about it and we've said here are our solutions. And we also said, federal government and state government, you have a role to be part of the problem solver here. And now with Flint, Michigan, you've seen the entire country agree with that. And with Hoosick Falls, you've seen people say absolutely, and this is going to continue because Americans believe and deserve predictable, clean water when they turn on their water fountains.
Thank you all very much
All
for
right.
being with us. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure, Tom. Always
Thanks,
a pleasure.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.